Hello and welcome to this episode of Pipeline to Profitability. I'm Alan Ferguson, and today I have the one and only Ed O'Connell joining me. And Ed is someone that is highly respected in the industry, someone that I look up to as a successful business owner, business builder, mentor, you name it. And what I'm going to do is hand you over to my man, Ed, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what his accomplishments, what he does. And together we're going to see if we can add as much value as possible to all of our listeners. Over to you, my man. Welcome, Ed.
Oh, welcome. Well, thank you. Welcome. Yeah. Okay. Uh, I just want to, before I get started on me, I just want to everybody know that Alan has been a mentor of mine, and he came up. One of the biggest ideas he's got, and that I think he teaches, and it's just amazing, with his sewer and drain work, which I used. I copied a lot of stuff from him before I even met him. I didn't even know I was copying his stuff, and he helped me codify that stuff that I pass on, so that if you've got any intelligence at all, you will get a hold of Alan and hear what he has to say and go to his training. If you don't, you're just flat stupid. That's all there is to it.
I happen
And
to agree with you, Ed. We don't agree on everything, but I definitely agree
yeah,
on
we agree with that one. Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is that in the plumbing industry, of which I am sort of I won't say I'm an expert, but I'm very experienced.
a god.
Yeah, I've gone from $250,000 in debt to a $6 million company, using a tool which I call two to a truck, and was able to erase that debt within 5 years, and then go on to make enough money to retire very comfortably up in the hills of California, to where now I'm bike riding, uh, fishing, kayaking, doing all the things. What do they call it? Living the dream. I'm living the dream.
That's
And
fantastic.
yeah, a lot of that has to do with just growing my company's sewer and drain business. That the numbers behind that are so amazing. I mean, double-digit profits to start with almost automatically, and gross margin of as high as 65%.
Wow.
It was just an amazing, and if you get a hold of Alan and you go to his trainings, you will do that also. I think one of the biggest mistakes a plumbing company does is to disdain sewer and drain work. So with that being said, a little bit about me is I just turned 80. May 9th, I turned 80 years old, and I had no idea I was going to live this long. I'm very happy I have. I married a trophy wife, Rebecca Kleiner. We've been married for 35 years. She I robbed the cradle. She's 11 years younger than me. And if you want to know the truth, she was a big part of O'Connell Plumbing growing, getting out of debt, and then being able to sell it for a nice little profit and walk away with what I consider success. A little bit about me: I had a great childhood. I was one of the last of the free range kids. During the summer, when there was no school, my mom would open the door and say, "Get the hell out of here!" When the street lights go on, come home and you'll eat dinner, and I don't want to see you during the day. So that's not quite true. I had a great mother, great father. Um, I uh, I got into college on a basketball scholarship because I was just too stupid to pass the SATs. And back then, you have to remember that little guys like me could still be point guards. Now you have to be about 10 feet tall to even be a guard anymore. So anyway, I went to the University of San Francisco, and I got hurt playing basketball over at the University of Hawaii. I blew out my knee, and the scholarship went away, and I think it's because I was at a Catholic college, and back in the '60s they could do that. So a friend of mine said, I really like college. I love learning for the first time in my life. A friend of mine, a guy by the name of Rich Ongro, uh, told me his dad was looking for a part-time helper in his plumbing business. So I jumped in and I worked my way through college, first as a shop boy, then as an apprentice, and eventually became, at the same time I graduated from college, I also was a full-on union trained journeyman plumber. Um, and that's the story of how I got into plumbing. In the 1960s, the Vietnam War was just flaring up. I got recalled into the service, ended up over there. Not. I don't want anybody to think I'm any kind of a warrior. I was over there as support for the 349th Military Airlift Wing out of Hamilton Air Force Base in California. Um, I didn't have a very successful military career, though I did get out with an honorable discharge. I went from being a lieutenant to an airman basic, but I did get that honorable discharge. I had a little trouble with authority, let's put it that way there. When I did get home, I ended up having a drinking and a drug problem. I ended up living on the streets for 10 years, all during the 70s. Um, I could go on and on and on about that, but that's it. That's fact. And at the end of that time, I got out of the VA, the Veterans Administration. They helped me get off the streets. I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. I met my wife there, Rebecca, and was lucky to get rid of all my bad, let's say bad karma, and was about when I was about 10 years sober, I went into business for myself. I am the quintessential loser that the E-Myth talks about. I was one of them wrench turners, thought I knew it all, and I didn't know anything. And as I said, I got into debt, $250,000. My wife and I, she decided to come into business with me, and she says, I can help you get out of this mess. 5 years, we paid off that debt, thanks to getting into the Service Nation Alliance. Without the Service Roundtable of the Service Nation Alliance, I wouldn't have even met guys like Alan. And I don't know if he's your partner or associate or whatever you call him, but Joe Cunningham, right, Alan?
Well, I'm employed by Joe. Part of my journey to the US, I could only get a work visa by having employment. So Joe has been fantastic. We've worked together over the years, but I'm actually now employed by the one and only Joe Cunningham, and that's not a bad thing. He's a great guy to work for. And I just want to say, Ed, I don't want to feel like I'm interrupting you, which I
No, not
certainly
at
am, by
all.
the way.
I don't
I
want to
want to
talk all.
thank you for your service, my friend. I've got the highest regard for military. And I grew up. My uncle was he served in Vietnam, and he got very sick, Agent Orange, and all that. And he's passed now, but it's a credit to anyone, irrespective of what you do. I have to say, it's a credit to you and all the great people that have been part of not just the US military, but the Australian military, New
Yeah.
Zealand, anyone. So thank you for your service. Back to you, my man.
Again, I just want to repeat, please don't think I was any kind of warrior type. I was in support. I went over to Vietnam about maybe, I think, five different times on what they call temporary duty. I stayed there a month each time. Uh, I won't go into it any further, but I just want people to know that when I was over there and where I was a hell of a lot different than being out in the bush or in country, as they used to say. So, but I'll leave it at that.
So Ed,
Yeah,
we've got our audience for Pipeline to Profitability is varied from small operations, one truck, two truck, three truck, all the way up to, some of the contractors that we play with throughout Service Roundtable, Service Nation, the world's greatest training organization. I had to throw that in. It's a plug for Service Nation, and Tom Peregrino is doing an amazing job. I was blessed to have. I call David Heimer and Matt Michelle my friends, as I'm sure you do. But
Yep.
so our audience is varied, all sizes. But to me, whether you're a one truck operation or a 100 truck operation, adding a drain division just fucking makes sense, right? But
It doesn't make any
your,
sense not to.
yeah, your business model, I'm fascinated by. I'm honoured that you've taken advice from me, the plumber from down under, right? But I would love for you to talk about your two men in a truck model. Obviously worked for you to do what you've done, but how have you applied maybe what you've learnt from me in Service Roundtable to that two truck model, and why should our audience adopt what you've done into their business?
Well, that was a great interruption because I was just about to head there, and that helps me focus. So thanks for that, because I can go off into the twilight. So,
No.
two to a truck was how I really grew my outfit, and it started by accident. Everybody thinks that there's no good workers today. I would just like to tell you there were no good workers back in the '80s when I started my business. I mean, it was just as hard to find any experienced people who weren't all messed up or who knew better than me or whatever. So I decided to do my own. So basically, how it started was I was out in a truck by myself. I hired a guy because I was just sick and tired of doing everything myself. His name was Roman. He stayed with me for 17 years.
Wow.
But after, by accident, uh, a year later, I said, Roman, you can start doing some of this stuff. He says, yeah. I sent him to the PHCC school as he was doing what I call handyman type plumbing, and that is putting in water heaters, garbage disposals, all the stuff, all the top 20 jobs that most easy jobs that most companies do, and sewer and drain cleaning, by the way. And uh, we when that happened, Roman was the one that said, why don't you get me a helper and get yourself another helper? Roman, well, that was Roman. His feedback to me. I hadn't thought about going any further other than hiring another guy to work with me. So I did. So I got another guy for Roman and I got another guy for me. Now, Roman turned out to be a really crappy manager. What happened was his helper was following him around all day long, not learning it. He was learning, but the service calls weren't very profitable. So I took him and his helper aside and I said, what's going on? I mean, you're going out there, you're taking longer to do the work with two guys than when Roman was doing it by himself. And come to find out, because they were both honest, the helper's name was Frank, by the way. He stayed with me for about 15 years. And they both came back and said, well, we don't know what to do. That's when I came up with checklists. I have checklists for everything. Thank you, E-Myth. Thank you, the advisory board groups that I belong to. But I developed these checklists for what Roman was to do on a job and what his helper Frank was to do on a job. Come to find out, they started doing stuff like putting in a water heater in 2 hours instead of 3 hours. California, you have to have 3 hours because of all the seismic stuff. That's just an example. They were putting in garbage disposals, even in double compartment sinks with the wrench time of only a half an hour. Meanwhile, these guys are working 2 hours on a 3 hour job, uh, 3/4 of an hour on an hour and a half job, and they, without really realizing that, I says, you guys are really doing good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pay you. This was the beginning of performance pay. I'm going to pay you for all the hours that you've sold, not the hours you actually did work. And that was the beginning of my performance pay. In other words, like if they had 3 heaters in a row, water heaters in a row, for 3 hours each, that would be 9 hours. They were getting it done in 6 hours, and I was paying them for those 9 hours.
Wow.
They were just so excited. Now, when I really got into performance pay, which is a whole other subject, I didn't lose anybody. I did not lose anybody for the longest time. So That's how two to a truck works. You get a guy, and it doesn't work for every plumber. It doesn't work for especially older guys if they want to be by themselves. Don't push two to a truck on them. But most of your young people, and today this is a fact, most young people today are social minded. They really like being they don't like being alone on jobs, but they really like it when two to a truck works. I've got a lot of clients who are just praising two to a truck. The and if you don't think you can pay an extra guy, think about it. If you base your flat rate, and this is easily to be echoed by any other good coach like Joe or like Alan, and that is you base your flat rate on 4 billable hours a day. And that pays for everything. That's your overhead, that's your gross margin, and that's your total sales and your profits. I was hitting double-digit profits with that. Now, the trick though is to have followed the checklist that I developed, and I can give them to anybody. Anybody who wants them, I'll send them to you. And with two to a truck. But as I was saying, you don't force it on anybody, but then just track. Bob Veering came up with a really easy tracker for me. If you don't want to do it in Service Titan or whatever your back office software is, this spreadsheet is absolutely easy. It tracks the number of calls that come in, demand calls only, and the calls booked by your CSR, which tells you how your CSR is doing and how your marketing is doing. And then it goes to tell you how many jobs your guys did, your guys went on, how many they sold, and how many maintenance agreements they won, how many extras they got on a call. So if you're using Joe's perfect service call and his transition statement, and you are getting extra jobs, and a couple of things is really important. You base your flat rate on 4 billable hours, and you make damn sure your guys are getting the jobs in your flat rate program done in the task times delineated. You've got to get them done in those task times. And you will see if that happens with two to a truck. If you've got, like I said, a water heater task time of 3 hours out here in California, and your guys are getting it done in 2, and if every extra job they get on a job, every extra task they get on a job, the gross margin goes from around 45, 50%, which is where your first job is. Anything else jumps up to 60, 65% because there's no overhead that you have to calculate in those other 2 jobs. So two to a truck makes you a ton of money. Using Joe Cunningham's perfect service call will guide you very easily to through the getting permission without asking for permission to get permission to do whole home inspections, and every extra task you do is incredibly profitable. If your guys, even if your guys can't do it, do the extras that they get, they can reschedule, and you can still make money, although you lose a little bit because of travel time, but you can still make money because when you go back to do those extras, you know exactly what to take. You don't have to go through the presentations you did on the first call. You just go there, lay down your mats, be really straightforward about the job, get it done in an excellent amount of time. And I was given 20% off my published prices and still making even if I had to reschedule, I was still making 50% or better gross margin.
Fantastic.
Everybody was happy.
Fantastic, Ed. I appreciate that. I'll slow you down for a sec because I'd just like to touch on a few things there. Now, those that know me and my involvement with Service Roundtable started around 2006. It's, like I met David Heimer. Actually, I was a member of Service Roundtable even before I met David Heimer at the Pumpers and Drain Cleaners Expo in Nashville. It's now renamed WWETT Wet. I don't know why they changed the name. I like the Pumpers and Drain Cleaners Expo. But you touched on, or we've both touched on best practice, but calculating the correct rate. So something that we're doing right now is we're Anyone that wants to calculate their rates, we not only provide the training, but we actually still use, I still believe to this day that the Service Roundtable labor rate calculator is the best out there. There's many others that have copied it, and we were considering making our own. I said to my team, don't, why would you, when their labor rate calculator is so powerful, and it does so many other things too. So you talked about the billable efficiency, 2 men to a truck, just on the training that Joe does, the perfect service call. Well, Joe's been coming down under. I started working with Joe in Australia around 2013. I met Joe at the same time that I met Ken Goodrich, and I may have even met you at the event as well. And so we've actually taken what Joe has taught me with the perfect service call and put it into out, because I'm more drains focused, even though I can help anyone with plumbing, electrical, air conditioning, but drains is where it's at. And I think you touched on that. It is the most profitable area of the business. Anyone that can prove me otherwise, I'm desperate, love to see what margins you can get better than drain repairs, especially when it gets to trenchless drain repairs. I'm always looking for better ways to make money for my clients, that is. So I'd like to maybe expand into, you did drains, right? So how did you use checklists? I love, I think I've seen a few of yours over the years. I do training on checklists. I believe that no technician, no company should be running their business without a checklist. But so tell me a little bit more, Ed, about how you utilize the checklist and how you run maybe a drain call using Joe Cunningham's system and the checklist.
Well, let me just touch on a couple of things before how I actually ran them, but and I may answer it kind of obliquely when I do this, but I my business was in Marin County, California, which is right on the seismic San Andreas Fault.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing but clay pipes in the ground, and back in, I think it was anyway, somewhere in the 80s, 82, 86, somewhere in there, Loma Prieta earthquake hit. And at the time, I had just bought into, it was a Canadian company called New Flow. They're still around today. But I purchased their products because instead of having this big machine that you push a liner into pipe, they had a pull method where you pulled it. You didn't need a machine. So they actually flew me up to Oshawa, Canada, which is near Toronto, and for free and back again. I'll never forget it. I felt like a big shot. But anyway, I purchased that stuff, all those stuffs. Then Loma Prieta hit. All the clay pipes went south. They all were cracked, stopping up, et cetera, et cetera. And here I was, one of the first guys to be into lining. I eventually
sorry to interrupt, Ed. What year was that? Do you remember roughly?
Let me hold on a second. Let me just take a look at Loma Prieta because I can tell you.
90s, I'm guessing.
I'll take you just 1 second. Loma Prieta.
Yeah.
Earthquake.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I'll talk while you're searching.
Yeah.
But we didn't enter trenchless repairs till probably mid 2000, 2005, 2006. And I did know of technology prior to that, but I think maybe in the 90s somewhere. I could be wrong.
89.
Oh, wow.
89. 1989 was when Loma Prieta hit, and people were throwing money at me. I can't tell you the number of jobs. I drove down this one street one time, and 6 of my 10 trucks, 6 of them were doing linings. And at that time, we were doing average run would be anywhere between 15 to 25 feet. That would be the average. And I was making about $8,000 a lateral. And people loved it because there was no digging. And with all the clay pipes, now all the clay pipes during that earthquake, they didn't just cave in, but they cracked. Yeah. And when they crack, it causes stoppages. So I had cameras, I had new flows lighting, and of course I had a dig and replace crew too. So I mean, I made more money than you could shake a stick at in gross margin. My God, if my gross margin on that stuff lapsed below, let's say,
70%?
if it lasts below 70%, I was doing something wrong.
I'd just like to stop there and everyone that's listening in, and most of my clients, if not all my clients, are drain. They're drain specific. Um, but I had no idea. I've never actually met anyone that was doing trenchless drain repairs prior to 2000. I do know of companies. Yeah, probably I should correct myself, but the fact that you were doing it in the friggin' 80s, I mean, that's amazing. But
Well,
look,
it was the last part of the 80s, so it was
yeah,
almost
the
in the 90s.
margins are phenomenally high. I mean, I share this, I share a story, and this is just an example, and I want everyone that's listening in, whether they're plumbing, electrical, air conditioning, to get a grasp of what is possible with drains and trenchless. So I remember a job we did, and it was probably, let's call it 2010. It was a block of units. It was on a really, really busy road, the main road that went from Sydney to Bondi Beach, and it's a one of the busiest. It's not a big road, but it's a busy road. And we had a drain problem underneath the road, and we had the technology, the trenchless technology. Now, if I was to do that job, let's say that job was underneath someone's lawn and it was 3, 4, 5 foot deep, we probably could have dug that and fixed it. That's 5 to 10,000, depending on how long. Or we could have done a trenchless repair of that job, for less than $10,000. But because it was under a main road, and there was a lot of stuff we had to do because we had to get a keyhole, we had to get an excavation point, and we had to get our equipment up. That they had to bring in the crews to divert the traffic around, and even we did this job at night. We had to divert the traffic around the keyhole, but we were basically putting a new pipe underneath one of the busiest roads in Sydney. And like I said, normally that job would be less than 10,000. We priced that job at $80,000. Now, anyone that's thinking, oh, that sounds like it's a ripoff, no, that was the fucking risk that we took.
Risk. Thank
Because
you.
if we had effed that job up, and I'm trying to behave myself with not cursing too much, Ed, it's you that actually causes me to drop the F bomb. I'm going to blame you, but it's passion actually. And you do get me excited, young man. But if anyone that's listening, that job carried a high level of risk. We had to do the job at night. That was an $80,000 job, and we repaired that drain perfectly. And they were happy to pay that because to dig up that road and shut that road down while they put a new drain in. And this is where, I mean, the margins there, there was probably a couple of $1,000s worth of cogs costs. There was labor at night. I think I had maybe a couple of guys on there, 3, maybe 4, just in case, because you got to be careful, plus the road crew. But the costs on that job were very minimal, but the risk was massive.
Yep.
But the profit, I mean, if that's all we did, the profit would be phenomenal. But that's why I recommend anyone that is considering adding drains is to consider trenchless drain repairs, where you can start to take some risk, get your guys well trained, take risk on jobs like the one I just discussed, and make a shit ton of money, right?
Yeah, Alan, I have a similar story about doing a job somebody else wanted $30,000 for, and I didn't know at the time when I bid it for $25,000, and it was like I could have done it for 2,000. But because of the risk involved, it was underneath the guy's swimming pool. If I'd have screwed this up, I would have had it was on a big hill, and this pool was built out to the side, and the sewer ran right underneath where he was. And if I'd have known it was $30,000, I would have charged $29,000. It still got the job, but that's the same thing. But one of the things I want to get to, Alan, if you're going to run two to a truck, if you want to do Alan's, really make a lot of money working with Alan, and you want your new guy to start making money for you within 3 months, and I mean a lot of money for you within 3 months, take a guy who's been with you, a helper who's been with you for 2 or 3 months, send him to Alan's classes, have him understand staging, which I just love that idea of staging. I've taken your idea of staging and applied it to a dozen different things, Alan. But within 3 months, this guy who you thought was going to be overhead is making you a ton of money. My guys would go out, they'd clear a sewer, and I like the way you say you clear, you don't clean. You poke a hole in the sewer, you get it running, then you put the camera down there, then you show the client. And at the time, my guy, if it was one of my more inexperienced guys, he would then get a hold of one of my selling techs. My selling tech would come over, and he would seal a job for a replacement, a burst, or a lining. And it was that simple. It made so much sense. It was unbelievable.
Love it, Ed.
Really.
Love it. Look, I'm really we're coming to the end of the podcast, my friend. This has been fun, but I just want to say I'm honoured to call you a friend. I've always loved working with you. You've got so much knowledge, and I want to, I mean, we've had discussions about. I mean, I'm coming on a couple of AB groups with you next week,
Right.
and we've discussed some of my members down under. The smaller guys would love to, I might get you on a call or two with some of my members. We've done this before back in the day, but I appreciate everything you do for the industry. Appreciate your wealth of knowledge. And yeah, look, when it comes to anyone that's listening in, when it comes to staging, I have a process for that. When it comes to the perfect service call for drains, we've got some amazing processes for that. Another thing, and it's all the rage now, call by call management. That's something that Joe taught me, I think, around 2013. Anyone that thinks it's a new thing, it's not. It's been around for a while. Call by call management is it's a process that we've incorporated with our staging, the perfect service call for drains. And our training is about helping contractors to add a drain division, make that highly profitable. And so, look, I'm just going to conclude up. One thing I'd like to ask you, Ed, then I'd like you to give everyone your contact details. Is there any book that you're reading at the moment you'd like to recommend to our listeners? Anything that's inspiring you? A book, maybe a podcast, or an audio that you're listening to?
Wow, there's so many. It's unbelievable. But believe it or not, I signed up for this program. It's called Short Form, and what it does, it makes a synopsis out of all the books that I've read. I'm just rereading the E-Myth for about the fifth or sixth time through Short Form and Traction.
Okay.
I'm a big proponent on small outfits getting 3 trucks and getting those trucks up to making $1 million in sales with a minimum 45% gross margin and some form of double-digit profits, even if it's 10%, but you usually will get better than that. So yeah, E-Myth Revisited or E-Myth for Contractors is the best route to go. If you're HVAC, you can't go wrong with Ken Goodrich's and Michael Gerber, who wrote the original E-Myth. They wrote the E-Myth for HVAC contractors.
Mm.
So I just really am a big proponent on small people. Listen, if you're smaller, say you're by yourself and maybe have 1 or 2 trucks and you're shooting for that 3rd truck, I lost my train of thought, but oh yeah, I know what I was going to say. Get a hold of Alan, implement what Alan's doing. Call me if you want, and I can get you started on all the files and stuff I have, and it's geared towards getting you into the Service Nation Alliance. Because once you're in the Service Nation Alliance, you can rig it so that it doesn't cost you anything through the vendor rebates. But anyway, here's the thing. Get in touch with Alan, get in touch with Joe, get in touch with me. And don't stay mediocre. I would rather have failed and gone bankrupt at $250,000 than to end up being mediocre. And by mediocre, I mean I have my own business. I might be making $100,000 a year, but I'm working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, no time off, no fun, phones ringing in my ear all the time. I was going berserk. And you will see that form in the E-Myth and how to get out of it. And if you want a shortcut, get a hold of Alan, get a hold of Joe, get a hold of me.
So how do our listeners get a hold of you, Ed? What's the best way? I know you've got a website, and what's the best way for everyone to reach you?
The best way is either text or email, and my email is ed.O'Connell, OCONNELL, at outlook.com. And for texting, it would be 415-302-1418. So it's that simple. And
Well, thank you.
and I tell you, even if you're a big company, treat your company as if it was a startup.
Yep.
People start getting complacent when their company gets to be 10, 12, 14 trucks. No, don't do it. Go back to basics. Make sure that every service call that every one of your people does, whether it's by themselves or two to a truck, are maximizing that service call. And you're absolutely ignorant if you don't get a hold of Alan or Joe Cunningham to have the way bypass all the malarkey, get started, make a lot of money, and laugh all the way to the bank like I did eventually.
Thank you, Ed. I really do appreciate that. And just one thing before we close out, anyone that's listening that wants to dramatically improve their drain business, the training that I provide is all online now. We've built a massive resource of virtual training. Everything I do is online. I'm a massive advocate of group coaching, where I take a group of contractors and take them through the process. So I'll conclude there. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. I'll get all your details, book recommendations and everything, and put it into the show notes. So it's an absolute honor to know you. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day, and all the best to you, my friend.
Well, thanks, Alan. I appreciate it. And one thing I would like from you before you go, give us the information on how to get into your online training.
Will do. Will do.
All right.
I've actually given you access to it. You can get into it, but we'll more on that. But I'll get you access for that, Ed. And thanks again for everyone for jumping on to our Pipeline to Profitability podcast. Alan Ferguson signing out. Thank you to the one and only Ed O'Connell.
And thanks for having me, Alan. And go out there and make a ton of money, folks. It's like there was an old saying that plumbing is a license to steal. And I say that euphemistically, but really get into drain work, gross margins of 65, 70%, net profits way up into the double. I mean, get a hold of it. Don't be ignorant. Get a hold of Alan and Joe and get your ass in gear.
Thanks, Ed. All right, take care. Good to see you, my man.
All right. Adios, Alan.